Hello everyone, Master01001 here, and with the release of hardops 986.5, we bring quite a few new improvements to the table. Long awaited is the support for a custom bevel profile, as well as improvements to the retinal system for drawing on the operator draw and showing borders and backgrounds. Also newly added to this version is 2-rope. The sync tooltip was updated in order to reduce some confusion. And we also added a few additional improvements to mirror just to make it a little bit more clear for you guys to follow what's going on with it whenever I'm using it in videos. And the main star of this release, last but not least, is Pizza Ops. Pizza Ops V2 has been added to this version, and I'm proud to announce that now you can order pizzas in style with the new loader, courtesy of ST3. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. So probably the quickest way to show custom profile in action is to just go in edit mode, press 2, select an edge, control click mark, and we'll just put a bevel on this and put a bunch of segments in it. We'll go over to our modifier panel and we'll change this over to custom profile. And what I like to do is choose sample straight edges, and also on my first handles that I add, I set those to immediately be sharp, or what I would normally call vector. And with that, I'm able to just draw straight lines and kind of just draw a custom bevel extrusion in here. And I spent a bit of time playing with custom profile, but I was a little disheartened by the difficulty required and what it would take to actually get hops to be compatible with such a thing. So right here, I'm actually trying to add another segment, and it's just being such a pain. There we go. And then I could drag another one in here. I've just been creating these really interesting type of profiles. Sorry about that being so difficult there. And we'll just create a flat there. And this is what we have. And if we switch over to Hops tool with Alt W, we can actually press hold control and bring up the dot and adjust this dynamically. So it's a really interesting way to perform a bevel, right? And of course you can control click bevel in your Q menu to just put a bevel on top of that. I'll press 1 to set the auto smooth to 60, and then I'll alt click on sharpen in order to put a weighted normal on this. So we'll control C and copy this, because I can tell you this is where the example breaks down. In fact, the example actually breaks down right here. So we'll just copy this, and whenever you perform a Boolean action in your current version, more than likely your bevel profile is just going to get completely eradicated. And this is something that we noticed off the bat, but I just found it as touchy ground as something to just avoid until we were able to get it fixed. But you know, I'll just undo that, and we'll minimize where I actually have 2.8 up over here, or 2.9 actually. No difference in versions or anything, just I'm using 2.83 as a test ground to show the last version, 2.9 to show the current one. And we'll just press Control V and just drop in what we had. And if we perform that same operation where we just select the cube, select the main shape, press Q, and we just select difference, you can see that now you're able to actually perform differences and basically work with custom profiles in a non-destructive fashion without difficulty. And this is something that also has come to Box Cutter. So if you have the latest version of Box Cutter, which a service update was put out for this, basically if you perform a box cut, it will no longer destroy the custom bevel profile as well. So this is something that's across both tools, and I'm happy to announce that we now support custom bevel profiles. And then of course we could press Alt W, go back to Hops tool, and just grab our dot and just play with this custom bevel profile. We can even bring it into nothing and just drag it out, just kind of creating this like instantaneous detail. And already having this sort of support has already given me ideas for the future of this. So we'll just have to stay tuned to see what comes next from this. So operator text was added a couple of versions back. Basically, if you run sharpen, it'll give you information letting you know what would happen during the sharpen operation. However, one of the things we've always struggled with was having it display correctly on high DPI displays or retina displays. And with our display for drawing, you can of course go under your preferences, and under operator options, there's an option to turn on operator background and operator border. And so we'll just turn those on. And if we run sharpen again, you can see that sharpen has a border around it. So so far so good, everything looks right. But if we were to say select this and do something like toggle modifiers, we could see that the border doesn't actually fit properly around it. And I'm just kind of crazy enough to really dig into someone for months and months about a border and the way it fits around text to finally get something done about it. So I'm proud to announce that things have finally improved with this. So we'll toggle the modifiers back on. We'll try another one. We'll use apply modifiers, and we see that this border shows up correctly. So let's try another system. Even though this cube's been destroyed from the previous example, we'll just go in and we'll use box cutter notifications, which isn't enabled. So we'll go into our opt-ins and we'll enable BC notifications. And so this means that basically if we draw and we cut, we can see there's notifications on screen. So in the previous versions, we didn't even have border and background support for box cutter stuff, which in later versions, once we added it, it became apparent that even for box cutter notifications that the border just wasn't showing right. So we did a bit of an overhaul on it, ST3, and now this version, I am proud to announce, has proper borders. So we hit sharpen in 2.9 using the latest version. We see that, drawing comes up pretty generic, but if we go under settings, we can now actually bring up our preferences into viewport instead of having to go into our preferences at the top. And so we'll just turn on operator background, operator border, and we'll of course save our preferences and just click OK. And so now whenever I run sharpen, you can see everything looks right. And then if I were to Alt W, switch over to box cutter, and we'll actually just draw a box. It's already showing finish, which spoils the surprise, but if we just draw bevel, we see that bevel fits right. We press V, we see that array is displaying correct. We see the numbers on inside of the border fitting just right. And then best of all, once it locks, it's perfectly displayed. You hit spacebar, it's perfectly displayed. And so this is one of those things we've been fighting with over the last couple of versions, and I'm proud to announce that finally the operator draw with the border and the background's displaying good enough for me to have it on by default. So I hope you guys enjoy it. In the last version of hardops, we introduced the smart rope, which basically if you place the 3D cursor and you click on the smart rope option, it will just add a smart rope at that location. Well, internally we expanded on it a little bit more, and now we'll just take this, bevel it, and we have a nice bevel going, and we'll just select this, press Q, go under operations, and we'll choose 2 rope, and you can see it now. This area is being converted to a rope, but you can also see that it didn't take the beveled version of it. So this is where we can actually go in and talk about adjust curve, because adjust curve has also been enhanced. We'll press H to bring up the help, and we see that there's a V option to change the spline type. So we'll press V, and we see that now we get something that's a little bit more rounded, except we lost our tips. So we'll press shift, we'll shift scroll to see if maybe we can change our spline order. That doesn't work. So we'll just press X to drop this without any sort of curve depth added. And we'll just tap into edit mode and just press E. And we'll just go here at the bottom, press E. And now we have our smart rope perfectly contoured to the shape, along with the Bezier transition in between. But of course, smart rope is a lot more basic than that. We can just apply this geometry, select this edge, press Q, go under operations, and just choose 2 rope. And that's all there is to it. And then of course, there's all the dots for you to mess with in case you want to get in and mess with the extrusion screw to make it a different type of rope altogether, or even go in and dissect it via modifier scroll. So under modifier, we have toggle modifiers, which will actually toggle it to its simplest state. However, you're also able to scroll it. So we'll go under operations and we'll choose modifier scroll, and we'll scroll it once, twice, 3 times. Now we have a circle. We scroll it again, we're at the display segment. Now we're at the part where it adds the radial array. So what I like to do is actually click and apply it right here, and then go into mod stack, look for the mods that are actually active at this point, and just play with them. In fact, at this point I could choose to make this 5 around. I could also choose to displace this even more than usual. And then let's actually go back and play with the modifier scroll again. So we're scrolling through it, and when we come out, we actually have a much different rope than before. So there's of course a lot of fun and learning to be had with actually dissecting these tools and finding out how they work for yourself. But I'm just happy to announce that smart rope is now part of hardops, and 2 rope is just a further expansion in that art. Alright, for this segment I just wanted to clarify some things about sync because I felt that there might have been a misunderstanding via the vagueness of the tooltip initially written. And so we have this scene, and I'll actually come out of rendered mode and we'll look at this in just shaded view, and we'll turn on overlay so we look at this like normal. And this scene is just a mess. It's just me messing with my object, and then there's a collection of cutters, and then there's a collection of decals. However, with my decals being in a separate collection, it is a little bit inconvenient because that means when I press 1 to go to my first collection, my second collection, my third collection, it's just a little problematic. I have to press 3 and then I have to hold shift and press 1 to look at my first collection. And I'm just a lazy person. I just don't want to deal with that. Of course, I can press N and go under the machine settings for decal machine and choose to actually have it placed in my active collection, which is what I should do, and set that as my defaults. But I actually like correcting these issues as well because this happened in so many old files before these such features existed, so I need a way to correct them and also somehow get these files in a way where they can be given away, sold, or whatever the case may be. So if I wanted to basically get everything to be the same with this, that's where Unify would come in. So I just select everything and I could just choose Unify, and so Unify will actually place everything that's visible here inside of the active collection. So far so good. That means I just have to press 1 to look at my main collection, press 2 to look at my cutters collection, and then 3 is my decals, which I don't actually need anymore, but I just have there as a formality. And then the next one is effect, which if I were to say copy this and paste this in the previous version of Blender. In fact, I'm even using an old version of Hops. That's how confident I am in it. We'll just paste it, and that didn't work out. So let's try that again. We just select something, Control C, Alt Tab, and let's try pasting that again. And it looks like it's just not gonna let me perform that paste to show this example, but a lot of the time I will copy something, and then let's say I have a new file and I paste it in. It would normally paste the entire mesh, but for some reason it's gonna just make me look crazy. But in the event that you end up with cutters in your main collection and they're not supposed to be, then you would want to basically evict them. So the third one is sync. So this thing so far is so good, right? Except if we look at this in camera view and we look at this in the rendered mode, this is what we're looking at. And if we press F12 though, there's a good chance that it's probably not going to come out exactly the way it's supposed to, which it looks like I was actually good to my spin. But there's cases where something like the spin or the screw will actually have a different amount of steps in the viewport than the render. And of course, I'm always working in the viewport, but I hate jumping to the render and being unpleasantly surprised, especially if my radial arrays have their render visibility turned off. So with this, I'm able to just basically select everything and just shift click to sync, and sync will actually make everything be synced up with the viewport settings of their modifiers, so that way whenever I press F12 it's an exact result. So someone actually suggested that it maybe should handle render settings as well, so maybe to render would be the final one, but I don't know if I want to have it be so exclusive for such a thing. So it is still something that we're debating, but eventually the functions of this should be something that should be inherently handled by the tool itself. It's just right now, it's just a utility that you're watching being built to just handle a bunch of very small nuances that come up in the typical hard surface workflow of dealing with booleans and bool shapes and kit ops inserts and decal machine decals. When it comes to the hops mirror, you can bring it up by just pressing Alt X. And to new users who are watching any of my older videos, they'll be immediately surprised by the lack of icons on screen and the fact that all the UI is now at the top of the screen. However, we tried to solve most of the problems that came up with the first mirror in the second version of it. And by solve, I mean we added more systems to basically make it more functional than ever, while also allowing people to orient the mirror exactly how they would want to be and set the origin exactly where they would want it to be. And then there's even advanced options for texture flipping, whether you want to have the active and things like that. But for the most part, you can actually use the mirror tool by just using these hotkeys that are at the bottom of the screen. For example, by shift clicking, you can see that you can multi-mirror. D will actually bring up a menu for the mirror, which is my favorite way to deal with the mirror. A will actually toggle through different modes of basically modifier and add a new modifier. S will actually toggle through your different pivot points, with W toggling through your different types of orientation. And then if you're ever lost with mirror and you just need to reset it back to defaults, that's where X would come in. So by pressing X, we can actually reset all the settings at the top back to default. So just to kind of get it crazy again, we'll just press W and S a couple of times just to get things crazy. And then we can just see that whenever I press, let's see, we press X, things just reset back to default. In addition to you being able to change the mirror by just pressing certain hotkeys and going through the D menu, you can also hold Alt, and that will allow you to scroll through the main modifier options of the mirror systems that we have. So you could just scroll through them and just choose what type of mirror operation that you want to have. However, if you're coming from classic tutorials where we only had 3 different systems, you can actually hold Control and it will scroll through a limited list where we can have basically modifier imply, which is basically symmetry, bisect mod, which is split the mesh in half and put a modifier on the other side, and then modifier, which will just put a modifier on it and mirror it to the other side without doing any sort of non-manifold splitting. And these things all have their benefits. For example, I will be just modeling sometimes and I will just press Alt X and decide that I want to hold Control and scroll this back to something like modifier apply and just quickly just modifier apply it. And the reason that it's actually called modifier apply is because special care is taken with this to make sure that if you were to mirror something with normals, that it actually mirrors correctly, versus if we press Alt X and press D and go to something like symmetry, we can see that symmetry is pretty much the same thing. It'll just symmetrize this. In fact, we'll do it again on this axis and maybe one more time down here, and we can see that it's just a one and done type of symmetry. But I can tell you that, you know, if you're importing your meshes from Moy or Fusion, or you're dealing with locked normals, modifier apply will get you a much better symmetrized type of normal holding workflow. So we'll select this loop, just Alt X, extrude this in. In fact, that's a bad way to extrude. We could have selected both of these and just Alt clicked EM macro to extrude that out. We can select this edge in the middle, shift click EM macro in order to, you know, send that edge in. We'll hold Control to bring that out. EM macro is one of my favorite tools. I've been playing with it a lot over the course of the last release. We press Alt X, modifier apply, we just slap it to the other side. Let's say we actually want to start working non-destructively though. So I press Alt X, and one of the big improvements to this release is you notice that now as I scroll through the list, it now tells you the state of the mirror. And as I change items on the list, it actually tells you the state of it changing as you're changing it in the list. And previously, it would actually show the first state and it would just stay up, and I found that to be just a bit misleading when it came to guiding people. In fact, I had a bit of an epiphany of where we should go with this mirror to make it the most intuitive for new users. So I'm eager to show the next version whenever it comes to the next hops that will, you know, finally take the mirror in a direction that will make it more understandable. So I set up a boolean right here, and to mirror this to the other side, we'll select the main shape and we'll press Alt X, and we'll press X to just reset it to modifier, and we'll click on the axis that we want to keep. And so now this is actually mirrored to the other side. And the benefit of working this way is that I can actually move the mesh across the junction point and bring it back. Of course, the traditional workflows exist. Like for example, if I wanted to press Alt X and press D and choose bisect and mod, then I can actually split this mesh in half like so. And then when we mirror it to the other side, this mesh is not real on the other side, pretty much the same as before. But if we move the mesh near the center, we're going to have mirroring issues. And for this reason, this is where modifier exists. So if you run into this sort of issue, me personally, I tend to roll with the punches and I will just add another modifier. For example, to just show that in action, I'll press Alt X and we'll just press A in order to add a modifier. And we're going to add a modifier on the Y. It's already notifying me that a modifier exists on the Y, but we're just going to ignore that and we're just going to add another modifier and try that again. Actually, it was A. I was supposed to, let's undo that. Sorry about that. We want to add a new modifier. And so now if we were to say duplicate this mesh and perform another cut, and the reason I'm duplicating it to show this will become apparent in a moment, but you can see that now it's actually performing the way it's supposed to, but this one is actually still having that same central issue. And so the best way to troubleshoot things when it comes to me diagnosing issues that happens in a modifier based workflow is to just shift click mod scroll toggle, which will send me through a modifier scroll, and we see that the mesh was split, and then a boolean took place, and then the mesh was split to the other side with the first mirror. So this will not fly. And so if we just select this mesh, go over to our modifier stack, we can see that we have boolean mirror, boolean mirror. So if we just drag this down, we now have this where we want it, but we may want to double check the order and make sure that's enabled. But now if we move it across, we can see that everything's fine, except we lost our mirror. So let's turn the mirror back on. And now we're able to actually jump this across the mirror point. And that is in spite of this actually being a split non-manifold mesh. But if we look at this, it's because what it's evaluating by the time it gets to the boolean is a fully manifold mesh, and that's because this one is locking it down, and this one is the one that's actually performing the heavy duty mirroring. But in the event that I want to continue mirroring this thing, we could just look at this, and let's just get weird for a moment. So I'm just going to bring in a plane, and we're just going to rotate it 45, and I'm going to press shift numpad 7 to look at it like so from this view, and we'll just delete the plane, and I'll select this object, and we'll press alt X, and we're at this strange view, but I still want to mirror this, so we'll change the origin to view. And so now I will mirror this to the other side, and we'll press alt X, and you might have noticed that an empty was created, and it notified you of an empty actually being created. And up in the corner, it will always notify you if an empty is about to be created. So anytime that you're working off of anything than the defaults, an empty will have to be created in order to avoid disrupting your origin. But that's fine. We can just perform another mirror, and we're good to go. So we've mirrored this 4 different ways, even though we've mirrored it a little oddly. In fact, we don't even need 2 mirrors. It just kind of confuses us, but let's say that we were going for this, 2-way mirror, and we want to just keep working in this fashion. In fact, I could press Alt W, switch over to box cutter, and we see that I'm still able to mirror over to this arbitrary side. And these are things that you previously couldn't do with the other mirror without having to do a bit of messing around. So this is one of the main reasons that we had to go forward with this new mirror in order to begin getting you guys acquainted to this new way of approaching mirroring, because there's definitely more functionality to be had, and the amount of complaints that we're racking up were just pointing us to the signs that we need to make a new mirror. So I definitely look forward to what improvements can be made with making this even more intuitive for new users. But I just wanted to show you that at this point, whenever you scroll through the list, it will at least update and display the correct information on screen with a very nice border around it if you so enable it. To longtime users of hardops, it's no secret that you could press Q, go under settings, and there's an option for pizza ops. And whenever you click it, it just brings up this very generic pizza pop-up. And I made this a long time ago. It was just really basic, and I can't tell you how many times that we've discussed removing it. And I've always fought to never remove this thing. And every time I have these discussions come up where it's like, hey, let's go ahead and remove that. It's silly. It's like, it's not silly to me. I have dreams for it. There's something that I want it to be. So I am proud to announce that as of this latest update, that if you are to select an object, press Q, go under settings, there is now a new pizza ops. And so with this, it still does the same function. It takes you to pizza places, but you now are able to add your own custom places to it by modifying the directory, adding additional thumbnails, and just adding URLs to the txt file. Of course, at some point I want to add a front end to it to make it a little bit more user friendly, but even the colors were something that was picked out by ST3, who was the one that actually finally took up the task to finally upgrade this thing. I was the one who went through and found some photos to put in the background of this, but if you're in the mood to order yourself a pizza, just know that we have something for you, even if you're wanting cabbage. So I figured what better way to conclude this video than making an old solenoid. So, we'll start off by clicking on the hops button. Everything's up to date. We'll click on the about button, current version. We're good to go. So we'll press X, delete everything. In case you're ever wondering what add-ons you're running, you can shift click the about button and it'll display your add-ons. So that way you can actually display what add-ons you have with Pride. So we'll shift A, add a plane, and we'll press Alt X, and I'll press D and switch over to bisect, and we'll just click on the X handle to just delete half of this and keeps half of it. Strange thing for a mirror to do, but it's just a thing. So we'll control click mark and we'll just add a bevel here and just roll in some segments. And in object mode, we'll just press Control tilde, go in our helper and bring up the bevel helper. So if you're using the latest version of hardops, it should also have support for the custom bevel profile in the helper itself. Something that I forgot to check for, but we did catch at the last moment, so that should be covered in this latest update. So we'll just create an interesting little custom bevel profile. Nothing serious, just a, you know, almost like a city skyline in a way. And then with these things, I also like to, you know, play with the front angles and just give it something interesting to play off of. And we'll create a few peaks here. Maybe we can get a point in here, bring it back down, unlike in previous parts of this demo. Like, dealing with this thing can be a little crazy. I'm actually wanting a ability to mess with profiles on screen, like in the viewport. I think would be really cool. Like if it was on screen and you could really precisely mess with these dots and level them out and select them and things like that. You know, maybe a dot edit system, I don't know. Man can dream. So, you know, messing with our segments, we can see that we actually get more of our angle in here. So it's important to make sure to have enough segments in order to get this to, you know, show up correctly. But now we can actually take this shape and using add modifier, we'll just add a screw and we see this blue, da-ba-dee-da-ba-da, meaning it's good. And if we press Alt W, we can switch over to Hops tool from box cutter, vice versa. And with this bevel dot that shows up whenever I hold control, we can just drag this dot. We can see this actually adjusting this bevel. We could drag it into nothing, or we could drag it out to be very much something. So, you know, maybe something like that is actually a good point. I won't be needing to adjust that dot anymore, so I'll press Alt W, jump back over to box cutter, and we see that the majority of the work for this is done. So I just wanted to end this video just doing a quick little solenoid just to kind of inspire you guys. A lot has definitely changed and been added in this version. However, I do want to you know, do more content actually showing how this stuff is intended to be used instead of just you know, doing this update content all the time. In fact, I didn't even mean to do a video about every aspect of this update. However, there were so many exciting things happening over the course of these latest updates that it was worth doing video content on. So I'm glad to see that people have been enjoying this latest hops. You know, sometimes I see people out there enjoying hops to the point of fury, which I guess is also a thing. But yeah, I'm glad to see that everyone's enjoying it. We definitely want to, you know, make it something that would improve everyone's workflow. At this point, I wanted to mirror to the other side, but I'm under bisect, which I don't want, so I'll press X to reset it. And we'll just set that back to modifier, and we'll just look at this from the top and perform a cut starting off the mesh. We'll bring that down, and it's already mirrored to the other side, so we're good to go. We'll just bring down an N-gon and just draw our shape. And you might notice that for me, I actually have N-gon perma-snap on, which is what I call angle lock, which basically makes it where I don't have to hold control in order to get it to snap automatically where I'm using N-gon. It allows me to basically draw it at an angle always, but if I do need to unlock it for any reason, I'm able to do that under control. So as of the latest update, that has now been added in, which is something I've been wanting for the longest. It now means that I'm able to stay inside of N-gon a lot longer without having to escape for various reasons. So just looking at this from the side, we're just continuing our cut in this little monstrosity we've created just ever so quickly, might I add. You know, it doesn't get any quicker than this. So let's roll back our bowl shapes and look for a very particular bowl shape. Looks like that's not a bowl shape. It looks like that is part of our bevel profile. So we'll just have to continue. So what I was thinking was that we could draw a circle and cut it out in a big way And we can see it getting a little bit slow with having to evaluate so many heavy modifiers at once. Modifiers. Alright, so here we are, we've cut a nice little intake. And so the next thing I want to do is, of course, do a split. Right now I have a little bit of shading being sacrificed. And so to really rectify that in the meantime, I can actually shorten it by just kind of mitigating it with a slice cut to just kind of break that shading from happening any further into the mesh. At this point, I can also think about mirroring it. If I press Alt X, I can just mirror this over to the other side, but this isn't actually the shape I want. It's way too short. It's not the typical size of a solenoid. So what I'll want to do is actually press Alt X and we'll mirror it to the other side, but instead of mirroring it like you're seeing there, we'll press Alt X, we'll press A to do a new modifier, we'll mirror it to the other side, and under Add Modifier, we'll add a Displace. And you can see that this displace is sitting below 2 mirrors. So if I hold Shift and I scroll once, you can see that now the displace is between them both. And with this axis, it's not gonna go the way we want, but if we press X, we can actually change the axis. And now we're actually pushing this out on the mirror. So it's really just a little bit of modifier magic. I saw someone asking about this in the Blender group, and I just wanted to actually address that in a video just to help answer that question. So continuing on with our mesh, we'll just press D. And in this case, if I draw this shape and I convert it to a make box, it's going to be poorly oriented due to me actually starting on the normal of the mesh. So we'll select the View Align button and we'll just draw a box, press A, press E again, and we'll just bring this box in, click to apply, and everything's so far so good. We can just select this top piece and just control click mark in order to just scale that down. I'll press 1 and set the profile to 0.5, which I never have my default set to, but I always tend to jump to in certain cases. And we'll just select both of these meshes and press Q and Union. And we'll just mirror this mesh to the other side using the same modifier as before. So when it comes to the mirror, you can actually choose which mirror you're modifying with this at the top, but I don't feel that this is entirely indicative, so I will be doing something about that in the future. But just know that you can just mirror this to the other side, and now we're actually back where we started with our mesh. We can actually mirror it as well on the Z. We have a perfectly symmetrized model. In fact, this edge on the inside, if we wanted to truly fix that, all we have to do is delete this single edge from the main mesh. But if we press Alt V and look at the face orientation, we can see that our face orientation got a little bit random. So sometimes I don't delete that edge just to, experiment with it. But I can tell you that whenever you delete it, you have to go under screw and you have to press C to calculate, and then you're good to go again. But otherwise, if I would have just left it, I would have had normal orientation issues and possibly cut errors down the road and wouldn't have known why, and it just would have been problematic. So sometimes it's good to just deal with that stuff in advance if you know it's going to happen. So we're just performing some cuts here. The solenoid's almost done. And I still hold control because I've been so used to Ngon not actually working the way it's supposed to for the longest that I just have gotten used to it. But now Ngon is actually as great as it was supposed to be. So we see that I'm trying to draw a box, but the orientation is just not right. So this is where line box comes in. And we can just, view align. And we already have angle snap on, so there's no need to hold control. And we're back in action. So anytime you're having alignment issues, of course you should be aware of your settings, because in this case it was something with view align. But anytime that you need to just override that orientation real quick in the form of a box, line box is there for you. And then of course is the classic tip for, if you're in line box, you can press W to use a wedge, and if you're the type of guy to want to cut wedges into things. But with that, we are pretty much done with our solenoid. I just wanted to do a quick example to demonstrate it in action. We still have the strange edge down the middle, but I can guarantee it won't show up in the render. And really, I'm curious on why it's happening. So let's take a look at our circle. We never talked about our circle. and I'm just rolling, and I'm just not gonna find it. So let's just jump over to the cutters collection and let's just grab it. And that one is that circle. What is this circle? You know what, something like that will actually work for this. So let's actually look at this in top view. We'll press D. And we don't want to actually draw a line box. I do want a hotkey to eventually remove line box as a state. And we're just going to just go down slicing this. Just real basic. It's a circular shape. Straight slices will do it. Of course, we could put some angles in there, really make our day interesting. But that really depends on how long I want to make this video. So we will do one more separation here. And interesting result so far, except we have this light in this camera here. We don't need that where we're going. So now we can select everything, have an active selection, and pressing Alt M, we could just control click through blank material scroll to give it some blank materials. And so I want to show you another trick that I use all the time, and that is radial array with 3D cursor for rotation. So we'll just draw an N-gon shape here, and we'll just double click it while holding shift in order to keep it live. So we have our live shape, we have our 3D cursor at the center because I never moved it. We'll press Q, and under mesh tools we'll control click radial 360 to just roll this around, and we just instantly was able to just set ourselves up. And this is something that I just find myself doing all the time. I just can't get enough of it. We'll do it again right here, just do a random cut, and we'll cut that in. Except we don't want this to go across the entire form. Maybe something like that. Maybe even grab this face, bring it in on the Y-axis. And now that we have that, we don't even have to be looking at it at a certain view to use radial array. We just control click it and it will just radial array it for us. And we just roll the wheel until we get where we want. And we're already here where we want to go. And the front is just looking just a little bit lonely to me. So I'll select this piece and shift click smart apply in order to smart apply this. And we can just press 3, go into face mode, C, circle select, and we'll just quickly paint a selection around. And press I to inset. And then control I to invert, which gives us just this piece of our clone duplicate. And we'll press 2 on solidify to push it both ways. Select both pieces, Q, difference, and this is our result so far, except we want to bring that back. So we'll bring it back, look at this from front mode, press Alt W, start box cutter, and instead of just jumping into N-gon, we're going to use panel. So that's with us turning on the line at the top for cyclic, but now I'm able to just really cut a few lines in here. And that'll suffice for detailing the front. But that is it. I just wanted to just do a quick test, just kind of showing the old Solenoid test in action and where it's come. I've done so many videos on the Solenoid. I want to do many more. It's one of my favorite tool tests. Right after the cube is one of my favorite ways to just kind of pop the knuckles and just play with design. But the next best thing is definitely getting in and playing with the Solenoid. So let's say we wanted to wrap this video up something proper. Well, looking at it from this view, I can just press Q. I can select something, deselect something, press Q, and we'll just add a camera. That's just one of my favorite ways. You can also go under operations and just add a camera. So now we have our camera down, and we'll just be rotating around this. So if we raise our frames to say 2000, we get something a lot more graceful. And we'll just you know, draw a box around everything, make an active selection, and just bevel it. Maybe not that way. We'll control click bevel to add a new bevel. And so this is of course going to get a little bit heavy, but we're of course beveling all these objects at the same time with various types of bevels, but I got faith in it. At the top, it appears we didn't have enough faith, but that's okay. We'll go under add modifier and we'll choose weighted normal, which will put a weighted normal on every object selected. One of my favorite reasons of having the weighted normal. And we can actually solve these things kind of on an individual level. For example, I'll select this thing and just move it. For this object, we can go under bevel and just kind of lower the bevel amount to get something a little bit more generous on the shape. We could also bring the width in a little bit because some of our cuts are just so shallow, they're not going to work in this upper area. But everything else for the most part worked out fine. This area got a little bit problematic. If we wanted to make it work out with such a large bevel, we'd have to press Alt V, look at our wireframe and actually evaluate the mesh. And it's this edge going right here that just destroys it. So me personally, I would actually press Q and add a decimate. And you see that it doesn't do very much here. But if we collapse all of our modifiers and we place our decimate in the right location, we should get a better result. And there's a ton of mods here, as you can see. We'll just place it here. No, maybe it's up here. Oh, we do gotta place this decimate up high. So we'll just drag it up even more. Is it after the screw? Yeah, there it goes. Once we start raising the angle, we're actually able to catch that area and then it's able to make the cut. So now we were able to get this bevel to work out, except for this area where things just did not work out. So usually at this point, I will spend a little bit of time just kind of babying things where I want. Sometimes I'll go so far as to bring back the initial cutter that hurted the mesh like it did. That appears to be I am thinking there's not a radial going around it. Alright, it is this mesh. So we bring it out and we see that we're able to get a better result for that bevel. However, we did kind of compromise this one. So if we just Alt scroll to lower the angle on that bevel, we can actually get to catch where it's supposed to. And if we jump into rendered view, we actually see what we received. So this object didn't get a good scroll, so we'll re-scroll it, select this one, Alt-M, Control-click to blank scroll that one. And we'll just scroll it until we get a nice material for it. And looking at this from camera view, we can turn off viewport overlays and just let this just process. And right now, there's not a lot going on, so we'll press Alt-VV to just go through and find a nice background for it. You know, nothing that will take the focus away from it, but something that can just show all the shapes and geometry and detail and whatnot. And so for the finale, I will press Alt-V and go under blank light, and we'll just scroll a light setup that we find that really kind of illuminates the model just right, hits it hard with some highlights, maybe rotate it just right, give it something suspenseful. And just like that, within 20 minutes, I've made a solenoid, just playing with the new profile in Blender, showing you the support that we have for both box cutter and hardops. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys next time.